This is the entrance to the government headquarters in Basseterre, St. Kitts Nevis. It was on these steps, on the evening of 18th June 1981, that the representatives of 7 Eastern Caribbean governments signed a treaty that established the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS. The Treaty of Basseterre created an organization whose supreme policy-making institution was a council of heads of government of the member states called the Authority, and a secretariat with a director general and 2 directors. These officials, together with the 7 signatories to the Treaty of Basseterre and the first prime ministers of the Authority, were the founders of the OECS, those who laid the foundation for an organization which 35 years later has become an essential part of governance in the Eastern Caribbean. In observance of the 35th anniversary of the OECS on 18th June 2016, the OECS Commission presents the series, The OECS, The Founders, which tells the story of the first 5 years of the organization through the memories of 5 of the founding leaders still with us. In this program, Sir Kennedy Simmonds. Sir Kennedy Alphonse Simmonds, born 12th April 1936, was the head of government of St. Kitts and Nevis from 21st February 1980 to 1995, and so represented his country on the OECS Authority during that 15-year period. A medical doctor by profession, he first won a seat in Parliament in a by-election in January 1979, following the death of Premier Robert Bradshaw. In the general elections of February 1980, his party, People's Action Movement, PAM, formed the government in coalition with the Nevis Reformation Party, and he became the 4th Premier of St. Kitts Nevis. He remained head of government until 1995, when PAM lost the general elections that year. He retired from active party politics in 2000, but went on to serve as Director of Medical Services in Anguilla until his retirement from public life in 2013. Sir Kennedy was the country's first Prime Minister at independence in 1983. He was knighted on 16 September 2004 and was declared a national hero on 19 September 2015. It was Sir Kennedy who, as Premier of St. Kitts Nevis, hosted the signing ceremony of the Treaty of Basseterre on 18th June 1981. He explained why he chose a public outdoor setting on the steps of government headquarters rather than an indoor closed session for the historic inauguration of the OECS.
I've always felt that one of the biggest impediments to regional integration, whether in the form of one government or just more efficient functional cooperation, is the skepticism of people in individual territories about it. I was a student in Jamaica at the time of the federal elections. It was the first time I'd ever voted in my life. It was at the federal elections, and I voted as a student in Jamaica. And to me, at that time, emotionally and this was the big thing. And it was a big disappointment, when it fell apart. But I think that a big issue was the doubt and the skepticism in people's minds in individual territories as to whether this was going to be the best thing for not just for the region, but for each people in each individual territory. And that skepticism, I think, didn't dissipate completely. I don't know if it had dissipated completely at all, but it was always there as a specter looming over the whole concept of. So when I came in, sort of from that background, my thinking was, look, we got to get people interested, maybe even enthusiastic about the concept. I think in my remarks at the opening, at both the WISER meeting and the opening here, I made that point. And so it was, in a sense, symbolic, but to say to people, look, we are doing this openly. You can see what's going on. Most of the times, all these treaties and protocols that were signed before,
doors, right.
as soon as the meeting or the council meeting was finished, the officials would bring the documents, we'd sign them up, photographs might be taken, maybe even a little TV, and then that's just circulated, and that's the end of that. But people were out there, they saw the leaders coming, they were able to like cheer and applaud the leaders. And
in fact, I remember Maurice Bishop was virtually
Maurice
mobbed.
Bishop was the most popular person at the time, and especially among young people. I mean, the whole concept of the Grenada Revolution, I think, would at that time would have been resonating among the younger generation, right? And perhaps had it not gone so, that may have continued to resonate. But the subsequent events, I think, caused people to indulge more in a bit of sober reflection. And it changed people's thinking about what was going on in Grenada.
So you were satisfied that the opening ceremony achieved what you wanted in terms of the public
it began a process, and there were other things, other aspects of the OECS that helped to develop that process. I mean, the sports desk. The sports desk, to me, was one of the most important organs within the OECS, because I mean, it helped to the younger people in particular, and people in general, to form tremendous friendships throughout the region. Right? And it brought the young people together, and the various competitions became very popular throughout the OECS regions.
So you would ascribe the success not just to the role of the then director at Spera, but the actual fact of people competing with each other for the first time within the OECS.
Yes, and within the OECS, yes, and moving back and forth. Right? I think that there were tremendous friendships formed during that time.
One example of successful institution setup was the pharmaceutical, the drug service.
Yes.
Can you recall what led to setting up of ECDS, as it was then called at the time? And now that it has worked, do you recommend it as a model which we can be followed in other functional areas?
Yeah, with the ECDS, I think it was really a very easy decision to come to, because back then, as now, the cost of healthcare was, continued to escalate, and we in the OECS have very little control over a lot of economic issues. This was one of them. The big companies, the big drug companies all over the world, even some of them, say, in the wider CARICOM, they develop products, and they set the prices with a view to recouping their investments, whether for research and development and so on. And we in the OECS we are simply users, consumers. But the issues that affect our people health-wise are the same as those that affect the people in the bigger territories that are closer to the sources of production. Right? The high blood pressure, the diabetes, the cancer, the obesity, all of these things affect us in equal measure. And so I think the concept was growing not only in the region but worldwide of the importance of generics in bringing down the cost of basic health care. Right? That was the worldwide people in the health field were trying to influence patients to look, you can get something which costs less, which is just as good, which has the same active ingredients and so on. And sometimes it took a while to influence people and to get people to accept that. But it was a worldwide trend, right, to move to generics. And then, with that concept in mind, the next thing was simply cost, the cost of goods. And this was one of the things that fit right into what the OECS was all about. Cooperating, working together in order to provide for the people of the country better economic circumstances, better quality of life, and so on. This fit right in. The big setback would have been if it was, again, like Hector, underfunded. And I think the decision to have the central bank be a sort of clearinghouse from that point of view was a very important one. And once the finances were in place, I mean, there was no doubt that this was a decision and that would have that significant influence upon the lives of the ordinary people throughout. And this, to me, as I said at the beginning, is one of the important aspects of OECS existence, in that people must feel and be aware that this organization, it means something to me.
It has an impact on their lives, yes.
Yeah, me personally. I can feel and see what influence it's having.
For Sir Kennedy, one of the most enduring memories of the OECS is the warm personal relationships that developed between the heads of government serving on the authority.
One of the experiences that I treasured, right, with being within that OECS grouping, was the kind of relationships which I was able to develop with people like Son Mitchell, Sir James Mitchell, John Compton, Eugenia Charles, and I think we developed a mutual respect, a mutual understanding, and a genuine friendship. Right? I think that stood us in good stead over the period, over the years. Yes. As a matter of fact, so James and I still communicate from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Well, in fact, we can as well go on now, as you raised it, to look at the way the authority operated. And you did say that there was a close relationship among all the heads. Would you say that the authority, in a sense, almost acted like a cabinet of ministers, given the closeness among the leaders?
Yes and no. Yes, from the point of view that we tried to arrive at consensus by listening to different views, expressing different views, trying to see where we can together. No, from the point of view, in a cabinet of ministers, there's one who is more equal than others. Right? So at the end of the day, you could have within a cabinet of ministers, right, a decision being influenced by the head, by the prime minister, the one who is more equal than others. Right? So from that point of view, it didn't quite operate that way. But certainly because of the relationship, and there was a tremendous respect, I think, amongst the leaders of that group. I'm not suggesting by any means that it doesn't exist elsewhere, because I don't know. But I can certainly tell you that there was tremendous respect. Not to exclude Eli was either. Prime Minister, at the time Deputy Prime Minister, and subsequently Prime Minister Lester Bird, John Osborne of Montserrat. John Osborne was a very close friend.
I was going to ask you, who was closest to you in those days, in those first 5 years of the OECS among the leaders?
John Osborne was probably my closest friend in the sense, too, that he was the longest standing. Right. I met John Osborne back in 1966, when 65, when our party was first formed, and he came here for some meeting, and he knew our party leader, Dr. William Herbert, very well, and because of that, through him, I met John Osborne. And from then, we maintained a very good relationship, right? So that I would say he was probably my longest standing friend within that grouping, and certainly the closest. But I certainly valued also the friendship that I've had with the prime ministers from the Windward Islands and their families. I mean, Lady Compton and I, we communicate from time to time, even now. You know.
Did countries tend to have strong national positions on issues? You said they tried to reach consensus. But would people say, okay, I'm speaking for St. Kitts, I'm speaking for Montserrat, I'm not shifting? What was, in terms of how you took decisions, was it from a regional perspective that you say, okay, what is best for the region, or would countries hold strongly to national positions?
There were times when there were strong national positions. And if we go back and reflect again, I'm trying to think now, at either the meeting, the last meeting of WISER, or the first meeting of the OECS, the public session. This issue, it was reflected in the speeches made. For example, I recall myself, either one of those meetings, making the point that when countries became independent, right, there was a tendency, based on history in the past, for nationalism, right, to become the major influence. And I was cautioning that if we're really going to build this, this regional movement, that we'd have to be very careful how we dealt with that issue. Right? So that, yes, from time to time, but I think, I'm sure you recall, there was a very strong feeling about making the OECS work. And that was my impression when I came in at the beginning, and all through, there was a strong feeling that we must find a way to make it work. Without a doubt, there was strong nationalism. Give you an example. In foreign affairs, some countries were with mainland China. Some countries were with Taiwan, the Republic of China and Taiwan, right, at the beginning. And I think that sort of relationship continued throughout. Now, though that decision by various countries was really based upon national interests, right, and not really reflecting any international norms. Right? So I think it was fair to say that throughout there were times and issues where the national interest, I think, became paramount.
Yeah, but they didn't, in a sense, put back the regional...
It didn't put back the regional movement. Yeah. I mean, even, I'm seeming to be raising some of your issues that you haven't raised yet. But even on the question of foreign affairs and foreign representation, yes, one group had, Antigua had its own mission in London, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Kitts and Nevis had joined together. But again, even that grouping, we shared. Right? We shared premises, shared some expenses, and so on. So that the principle of sharing, we were different, but there was still some sharings. So,
but since you touched on foreign policy was in fact one of the major objectives of the OECS,
yeah,
because
right.
it was established. I was involved in this, at the beginning. It was established really to have joint representation after independence, and we formed this new organization. But in practice, it didn't. Foreign policy coordination didn't take primary place afterwards. What do you account for that? As you said, there were people appointed, different high commissioners. St. Kitts, St. Vincent, St. Lucia had one high commissioner in London. Antigua was on its own. Grenada was on its own, Dominica. And there was never really meetings of foreign affairs officials that
No.
work out a foreign policy position for the OECS?
For the OECS. I think there were several factors. I think one of them, too, was the CARICOM factor. As we presenting a face to the world. Yes, from the OECS point of view, we were trying to present a strong, unified position. But the same principle was operating within CARICOM, where we also want to try to present a stronger, unified position. Right? In our relationships with the United Nations, with the OECS. And one of the important considerations at the time was trying to get positions, to use our combined strength to get positions in these various organizations. Right? In a practical sense, we really were subsumed or consumed within
the wider CARICOM.
The wider CARICOM position.
I want to take you to what I consider to be probably in the first 5 years of the OECS is probably the greatest challenge and crisis, and that was the Grenada Revolution and the collapse of the Grenada Revolution, the assassination of Maurice Bishop. And I will, before I ask you any questions about what I want to discuss today, the impact of that on the OECS, on the leaders, and what happened in intervention. But I want to read to you first two quotations from statements that you made at the time. You said in 1984, and that is after everything had happened, that new beginning, quote, that new beginning was not without its problems. There was even then unease that Grenada was represented by a revolutionary government. Coupled with that uneasiness, however, was a genuine concern for the people of Grenada, that they should be partners in the building of a regional identity. Diplomatic initiatives to bring about the return of democratic government to Grenada never ceased within the 3 years following the signing of the treaty. And then when the revolution collapsed and OECS came together to try to right the situation, you said, "It is true, however, that adversity can bring people together, and the cooperation and the coordination within the OECS has never been at a higher level. And suddenly, in times of crisis, it is easy for people to forget differences and work together. I hope that when the feelings and the concerns of the crisis are not so heavily upon us, that we'll be able to muster the same sense of resolution, the same sense of commitment to regional development and unity, so that we can submerge our differences and work together for the development of the people of the region. I assure you that it will be much more difficult when the crisis appears to weigh less heavily upon us, but the need for cooperation will be no less urgent." So I want to start by asking you, when the news of Maurice Bishop's assassination came, what was the impact? I remember there was a meeting in fact, Barbados with Tom Adams. What was the impact of that on their heads, given, as you said, that Maurice had become close to you, to all of you all, and in fact you were trying for the 3 years to bring democratic government.
Exactly, right? That's the point. Let me back up to that. Right? The presence of Maurice Bishop and his revolution government within the OECS was one of those issues which was accepted as a fact of life, as a reality. It was not what we would have preferred or the way we would have preferred it, but it's a fact of life. He's the government of Grenada, and we accepted that. But during that period, within the OECS, we never stopped urging that the revolutionary government at some point should take measures to restore the democratic electoral process in Grenada. We were always uncomfortable, not with the representatives, because as a matter of fact, the individuals who came to represent Grenada worked very well with us. But we were always uncomfortable with this concept that here was revolutionary government within our midst. There was also a feeling that the same thing could happen somewhere else. Right? There, but for the grace of God, go I. Right? So,
so were you all
again,
talking to him?
Against that now, right? We are working with the hope and with the expectation, not just the hope, with the expectation that this situation would change over time, and the electoral process would be resumed, and that aspect of history, in a sense, would gradually be put behind us.
Did you all discuss that with him in your inner council?
Yes, yes, yes. And we got the impression that we were moving. We are of one mind on that Bishop himself wanted to move to that. And you know, frankly, we felt that based upon what we observed there, that the likelihood that if you had a polling in Grenada at that point in time, there's no question that Maurice Bishop would have been acclaimed by a vast majority, outstanding majority, no question about that, in our minds. Right? So then the events, I mean, were just shocking. I remember we were at a meeting, I think in Barbados, when this thing came over the radio, and we heard of this, heard the voice of this colonel or major, whatever he was, announcing this curfew. Right? And to me, it was chilling, because we are not accustomed to that kind of thing in the region. And because I suppose the fact that we were in Barbados was involved right at the very beginning in discussion in relation to that matter. And it was clear that we, as an OECS, though we would have liked maybe even to intervene at the time, that we were not in a position to intervene. And if you go back, just to digress slightly at this point, the OECS last WISER meeting and the first OECS meeting, Lester Bird, one of the things he emphasized was the question of security of the region, and the need for us to come together, cooperate, and to develop security. The emphasis at the time was on the Coast Guard. That was the emphasis. Yeah. But the whole concept
of... OECS had just moved to setting up this regional
security system, the RSS, right? So I'm saying at the very beginning, that was... it was something which was front and center. Maybe the events in Grenada, the takeover by Bishop, might have influenced, not maybe, without a doubt, influenced the thinking in relation to this. But we were nowhere near being able. Right? Now, there's always a debate as to whether or not it should have involved the United States. There was always there would always be debate. And I think somebody said, whether you're right or wrong, the point is that we were decisive. The point is that we didn't feel that, well, that's their internal affairs. That's Grenada, their internal affairs. Without an OECS, maybe they would have had to take that kind of position. Well, that's their internal affairs and we can't intervene. But within the OECS, we are brothers. And there was that feeling that we could not sit idly by and allow the situation to continue. And though some people criticize approaching a foreign government, who obviously, we can't be naive about it.
They had their own, their own interests.
But isn't that what world diplomacy
your national interests coincide?
Theirs coincided with ours. That's how it is in the world. Right? So, yes, we approached the United States, or the United States approached us. I mean, there was definitely a confluence of interest. But we held fast to the concept that the OECS as an organization, that we were all members of this organization, and that we felt that we had a right to intervene in Grenada and to try to right the situation. And I mean, I won't retreat from that position.
You think how many
at
years
all.
later that was the correct decision to take?
Yes. And I think subsequent events, to my mind, have proved that. But the concern that I had expressed, at the time of crisis, all the differences and the issues that we got in the OECS paled in comparison. Here, until that Grenada, and as we got closer now, with the interim government, and then we're going to have elected government coming, as we got closer to having a full resolution of this situation, I sort of want to voice the concern, right, that this thing had brought us closer together. I sincerely hoped that
will continue.
Right, once it could continue.
You spoke in that excerpt that I read of after the crisis, you hope that we'll continue to work together. And a few years later, in 86, just after the 5th anniversary of the OECS, we had this initiative for OECS Political Union, which started with Sir James Mitchell. And in Tortola, the call was made that let us work towards a political union within 2 years. In the end, the leewards pulled away, the windwards tried, and the whole thing collapsed. What do you ascribe, first of all, for the leewards not continuing with the initiative, the Tortola initiative, and for the whole failure of political union, despite the fact after Grenada, as you said, and as Lester said, they were so close together, and one felt that there was a sense of community after Grenada.
That's the reality in political life, and I can think of some other examples throughout the region. But as a leader of politics, if at that point in time, right in the heart of it, perhaps one had said, look, this is what we have to do this in order to ensure the stability of the region, we might have had strong support from people in the region. But at the time afterwards, when the proposal for a political union came up, I personally felt that my own political survival could not be assured if such a decision was taken at that time. And I can't speak for others in the leaders. I don't know how Antigua's position was. But I did not feel that people in St. Kitts and Nevis were strongly enough behind the concept of forming a government, a regional government at that point in time.
But don't you think an effort could have been made to bring them along? You said earlier on that your first vote, the first time you voted, was in the federal elections.
And I was all gung-ho about the concept. And I was all gung-ho.
And you were disappointed when the federation collapsed.
Yeah, but
so
maybe I was like
later,
Eric Williams. But maybe I was like Eric Williams, one from 10 leaves not.
Because at the time, Antigua was the first, and I think it had to do with the idea that was being pushed by James Mitchell of a unitary state. Although they were saying, well, the concept of what we're going to form is left to be discussed. And Verburd made a statement that he didn't want to be colonized anymore. And so Antigua pulled out, and then the leaders followed. Do you think there's a concept of the unitary state that put some people off?
The unitary state, definitely, without a doubt, the unitary state at that point in time would not have taken. So here, and so perhaps in the leewards, the concept of the unitary state would not have gone, was not one that was acceptable. And it takes us right back to the beginning of the Federation. The suspicion and the doubt which started in Jamaica. Right? The feeling among people that if we come together, that somehow something is going to be taken away from us. And I don't think we have got over that completely.
Would you say that your generation of political leaders, before I ask you that question, Do you think that people in the region want some form of political union, want some kind of federation? And if you think so, like you were so excited in the 50s, do you think that your generation of political leaders has failed those people? In the sense that we have not been able to form, after the collapse of the federation, a unified...
Good. I don't really... I have come to over the years to believe that people in the region are not comfortable with the idea of a single government. As I say, I was inclined towards that in my youth as a student back then. Right. But later on, I see that this, I don't think people are comfortable with it. So in that sense, I don't think we have failed them. What we have failed to do is to be able to mobilize, to better mobilize support amongst people for the concept.
And is that because leaders see themselves as having a diminished role in, let's say, a regional governance structure, that they're not mobilized? They'll mobilize people on other things, on national issues, but not on on the issue of a regional government, original governance system that works.
Unfortunately, it is a fact of life that when people present themselves for political office, the first consideration is to win political office. Otherwise, you don't present yourself.
Yeah.
Right? That's the bottom line. And sometimes when you look at the fluctuations of fortunes, right, that occur over time anywhere, right, that can influence how one seeks to go forward. As I said, there is a tide in the affairs of men which take not the flood. The thing is, in a region like us, the tide, for it to be taken at the flood, you have to have the tide in the various places, because if the tide in one place is up and it's down in the other place, you're not going anywhere. You see? And
so the tide must be high in all places at the same time.
The tide must be high in all at the same time. As I said, the Grenada situation, just in that point in time. Adversity.
Yeah.
Adversity. I think everywhere there was, the tide was high in the sense that we have to do something about that. But once something was done about that, the fears that I expressed came to be true. Yeah. So.
When OECS, the treaty was signed in 1981 here in Bastia, you had in fact just come to political office. As we wrap up, I'm going to ask you, what were your expectations then as a young political leader coming into a regional organization? What were your expectations then? And by the time you left, probably 13 or 14 years later, were those expectations fulfilled? And as you look back now on the OECS, was what that happened in Bastia on the 18th of June, 1981, was it worth it for the people of the region?
Well, by the time I came into government, of course, I was a different person from the student in Jamaica. And what my expectations were that we would develop a stronger regional cooperation. We used the term functional cooperation a lot in those days. And I felt that that was our immediate objective. In the back of my mind, there was always the hope that maybe we could get there. But I realized at that point in time that if you were going to influence people towards a stronger union, right, I think you had to kind of demonstrate the benefits of your first step, is functional cooperation. Now, in terms of the benefits, were the benefits realized during our time? I think without a doubt. I mean, we've gone through some of them already in this interview. The central bank and its influence, even today, the effect that our currency, in spite of all the economic problems in the region and throughout the world, that is one of the things that has remained stable. The drug service, in terms of, I mean, all these people who are chronic disease people who have to depend upon the drug service. In education, the non-campus service, there have been significant benefits. There's an organization, maybe a small organization we have mentioned, the Civil Aviation.
Yes, Civil Aviation.
Civil Aviation Organization. I had a personal, experience as a leader of St. Kitts and Nevis of how important that civil aviation organization.
In fact, the OECS, when it came, in fact, regularized the operations of
civil aviation organization. And you see, as it was important for us, mini-state, to have that kind of expertise available to us as it was to everybody else in the region in dealing with certain issues. I remember we had to call on the Civil Aviation Organization to assist us with building codes in relation to the way our airport ran, and there's a hill close to the end of the takeoff area. And they advised at the time, and we followed their advice. Now, some people were upset because they couldn't do things exactly what they wanted to do, but to this point, we were able to say, look, this is something we can't just go and administratively do. We call on the experts in the region, and we follow their advice. So that civil aviation organization are very important. So that we haven't got a single government in the region, but there have been important successes. And perhaps when I'm gone, long time after, maybe things may change. You never know. I don't know if we'll need another crisis to cement. I hope not. Right. But without a doubt, the OECS has had a significant impact upon lives of people, and it continues still to do that. And, well, I don't know if we can ask for a lot more at this point in time.
This has been the second program in the series, the OECS, the Founders, the story of the early years of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, told through the memories of some of those who contributed to its founding 35 years ago. Today's program, Sir Kennedy Simmonds of St. Kitts Nevis. In our next program, Sir James Mitchell of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
My biggest problem with the Leewards was, one, they weren't interested in any form of political union. That's number one. They were not only didn't support, they were hostile to it.